California is famous for its sun-soaked beaches and vibrant cities, but hidden deep in its wilderness lie forests darker than anyone dares to imagine. These are not just woods. They are places where the past refuses to rest, where whispers echo through the trees and shadows seem alive. Locals tell stories of ghostly figures, mysterious lights, and chilling encounters that defy explanation. Tonight, we explore the top 5 creepiest haunted forests in California, revealing real hauntings and terrifying true stories. Every step we take may lead us closer to the unknown. If you want to explore more chilling places like this, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next terrifying journey. 1. Redwood National Forest, Ghostly Hiker Encounters. The towering trees of Redwood National Forest are older than most civilizations. Some have stood for over 2,000 years, their bark scarred by centuries of storms and fires. Tourists often come here to admire their size, to stand beneath trunks so wide that 10 people can't link arms around them. But for those who've been here after dark, the forest is not just a place of beauty, it's a place where the living and the dead seem to share the same trails. One such story comes from a man named Daniel Harper, an experienced hiker who had camped in dozens of forests across the United States. He had heard rumors about the Redwood's ghostly encounters but dismissed them as campfire tales. It was only during a solo hiking trip in late September that he began to understand why locals rarely venture deep into certain parts of the forest. That evening, the sun dipped below the horizon quicker than Daniel expected. The deep canopy swallowed what little light remained, leaving him in an almost unnatural darkness. He decided to follow a narrow trail back toward his campsite, the sound of his own footsteps crunching against the forest floor breaking the heavy silence. But soon, he noticed something strange: footsteps that weren't his. At first, he thought it was an echo, but the rhythm was off. The sound was heavier, deliberate, almost as if someone was matching his pace. He turned around. Nothing. No flicker of movement. No shadow. A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of burning wood, because there was no fire anywhere nearby. Then, from the corner of his eye, Daniel caught a glimpse of a figure, a man in old hiking gear, standing still among the trees. His clothes looked weathered, as if they belonged to another time. When Daniel called out, the figure didn't move. It simply turned its head toward him, revealing pale, almost gray skin and eyes that reflected no light. In the blink of an eye, the figure vanished, leaving behind only the sound of snapping twigs deeper in the forest. Shaken, Daniel reached his campsite and packed up immediately. The next morning, he shared his experience with a park ranger. The ranger's face grew pale. "You're not the first to see him," he said quietly. "Years ago, a hiker went missing here. We never found his body, but people still hear his footsteps, still smell the smoke from the night he disappeared." Since that night, Daniel refuses to hike alone. He says the redwoods aren't empty, they remember, and sometimes they let you know you're not walking those trails alone. 2. Griffith Park, the cursed land. Los Angeles may be known for its glittering lights and glamorous life, but hidden within the city's hills lies Griffith Park, a place locals say carries a curse that has lingered for over a century. The legend begins in the late 1800s, when a wealthy landowner named Don Antonio Feliz died unexpectedly. His vast land holdings, which would later become Griffith Park, were given away under suspicious circumstances. According to stories, his blind niece, who believed she had been cheated out of her inheritance, stood before a gathering and cursed the land, vowing that all who profited from it would meet tragedy. For decades, that curse seemed like just a story, until strange events began to pile up. Fires that couldn't be explained, sudden deaths, and accidents that seemed too bizarre to be coincidence. Even today, park rangers talk about certain areas where radios fail, compasses spin wildly, and hikers feel an unshakable sense of being watched. One night, a local photographer named Melissa decided to visit the park after hours, hoping to capture the city skyline framed by the moonlit hills. She parked near an old abandoned picnic area, a place she later learned had been the site of several unexplained accidents. As she set up her tripod, the air around her seemed to grow unnaturally still. Not a single leaf moved in the trees, yet she felt a cold wind brush against her cheek. A whisper faint, almost too quiet to hear, brushed past her ear. It was a woman's voice, trembling and desperate. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Sorrow and rage. Melissa froze. In the faint glow of her camera's screen, she saw something in the distance silhouetted against the trees, a woman in a long, old-fashioned dress. The figure stood perfectly still, her face obscured by shadow. Then, without taking a step, the figure seemed to glide closer, the sound of fabric dragging across dry leaves echoing in the silence. Melissa grabbed her camera and fled, but when she reviewed her photos the next day, she stopped cold. In the frame where the woman had stood, the camera had captured nothing but empty space, yet the shadow of a human figure stretched unnaturally long across the ground. When she told her story to a park historian, he nodded gravely. Many believe that's the niece who cursed this land. She wanders still, making sure her warning is never forgotten. Melissa never returned to Griffith Park after that night. She says the city's lights may shine bright, but in the hills above Los Angeles, there are shadows that will never fade. 3 Dark Watchers Trail. Mysterious shadow figures. In the rugged Santa Lucia Mountains of California, there's a stretch of trail known among hikers as the Dark Watchers' Path. The name alone carries weight. Locals have spoken for generations about towering, human-like shadow figures that appear along the ridges, silently observing travelers before vanishing into thin air. For most people, the Dark Watchers are just a campfire story, something to spook newcomers. But for Matthew Cole, a school teacher and part-time nature photographer, the legend became terrifyingly real. Matthew had set out early one autumn morning to capture the mountains bathed in golden light. The first few miles of the hike were peaceful, birds singing, wind rustling through the chaparral. But as he climbed higher, the air grew still, almost heavy. The silence was so complete that even his own footsteps seemed too loud. That's when he saw it. On a ridge about 200 yards ahead stood a figure tall, impossibly tall, at least 8 feet, cloaked in black, with no discernible features. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It simply stood there, watching him. Matthew froze. He raised his camera, but in the moment, he pressed the shutter. The figure dissolved, not like a person walking away, but like smoke blown into the wind. Shaken, he continued along the trail, telling himself it was a trick of the light. But just an hour later, as he rounded a bend, he saw another one, this time closer. The same towering shape, featureless, motionless, staring down at him from a ledge. A wave of dread swept through him, so strong, it felt physical. He turned around to head back, only to find yet another figure behind him, blocking the trail. No sound, no movement, just a presence so oppressive he felt his chest tighten. Then, in an instant, it was gone. Matthew all but ran the rest of the way down the mountain. When he told a park ranger what he'd seen, the man's expression darkened. "You're not the first," he said quietly. The Chumash people spoke of them centuries ago, tall shadow beings who appear to travelers alone in these mountains. They never speak, never touch you. But if you see them more than once in a single day, it means they've taken an interest in you. Matthew has never returned to the Dark Watchers Trail. To this day, he can't shake the feeling that somewhere, from some impossible distance, those silent watchers still know his name. 4 Joshua Tree National Park. Strange lights and voices. Joshua Tree National Park is famous for its alien-like rock formations and twisted, spiky trees that seem to reach for the sky like frozen lightning bolts. But when the sun dips below the horizon, this desert wonderland transforms into something far stranger and far more unsettling. It was early spring when couple Hannah and Miguel decided to spend a weekend camping under the park's star-filled sky. They'd heard stories about strange lights and voices out here, but chalked them up to myths, tales told by campers who'd spent too much time in the dark. On their second night, they hiked to a high ridge to watch the Milky Way. The desert air was still and crisp, the kind of silence that makes you feel the world has stopped spinning. That's when they saw it just beyond the next ridge, a pulsing blue light, hovering in the air. At first, they thought it was a drone, but the movement was too organic. It floated slowly, almost like it was searching for something. Then another light appeared, this one a pale green, flickering in and out as though it was struggling to stay visible. They decided to move closer, but as they descended toward the lights, the air seemed to thicken. Hannah stopped in her tracks. She swore she heard someone whisper her name. Miguel laughed nervously, telling her it was the wind, but a few seconds later, he froze too. The whisper came again, this time closer, and in a voice neither of them recognized. Suddenly, the blue light shot toward them, moving in complete silence. The couple stumbled backward, their flashlights flickering as if the batteries were dying. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the light veered off into the darkness and vanished. They hurried back to their tent, but the whispers followed, sometimes faint, sometimes almost directly in their ears. Neither of them slept that night. At dawn, they packed up and left without breakfast. Months later, Miguel told a coworker about their experience. The man, a local who'd grown up near the park, nodded grimly. "You saw the lantern bearers," he said. "Old miners who died out there, still searching for their way home. The lights guide them, and if they notice you, sometimes they try to guide you too, away from the living world." To this day, Hannah and Miguel refuse to camp anywhere near Joshua Tree. And when they tell their story, they both swear on the same detail. Those voices didn't just call to them, they called them by name. 5 Blackstreet R Canyon, haunted by tragic past. Black Star Canyon, tucked deep in the Santa Ana Mountains of California, looks like any other rugged hiking spot by day. Rocky trails, steep cliffs, and the occasional rustle of wildlife. But locals know it by another name, the Canyon of No Return. They say its past is soaked in blood, and that the dead here don't rest quietly. The canyon's dark history begins in the 1800s, when it was the site of a violent massacre between settlers and a local Native American tribe. Over the decades, its remote paths have been marked by countless other tragedies, murders, mysterious disappearances, and even a school bus accident that claimed several young lives. It was this reputation that drew a group of friends, Jake, Lila, and Sam, to hike there one overcast afternoon. They wanted a thrill, nothing more. The trail was eerily quiet, the air heavy, as if the canyon itself was holding its breath. An hour into their hike, they came across the remnants of an old stone foundation, just a crumbling wall and a half-buried fireplace. Lila stopped suddenly. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. At first, Jake and Sam heard nothing. Then, faintly, came the sound of children laughing. The 3 of them froze. The laughter grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls, though the trail ahead was completely empty. Then came the whispers, low, urgent, impossible to understand, but filled with a sense of dread. The air grew icy, and Jake noticed his breath fogging in the warm afternoon. That's when they saw it. Standing on the ridge above them was a figure in torn, dust-covered clothing, its face pale, its eyes black voids. It didn't move, but the whispers grew deafening, drowning out every other sound. Lila, trembling, begged them to leave. They turned back, only to find another figure blocking the trail, a man in a miner's outfit, his jaw hanging at an unnatural angle, as if broken. Without a sound, he pointed toward the canyon floor. Fear took over. The three friends bolted, scrambling over rocks, until the sounds began to fade. By the time they reached their car, the sun had broken through the clouds, but the sense of being watched lingered, heavy and suffocating. Weeks later, Jake researched the canyon's history. He found an old newspaper clipping about a group of miners ambushed and killed on that very trail. Their bodies never recovered. And chillingly, one of the descriptions matched the man they'd seen down to the broken jaw. None of them have been back since. Lila says she sometimes hears that same laughter in her dreams and wakes up with the feeling that someone is standing at the foot of her bed, waiting.